Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I first noticed her when I was 15, though I didn't understand the weight of it at the time. My father had remarried 2 years prior after my mother passed, and I'd long stopped expecting the empty promises of love and companionship from men who claimed they could fill the void my mother left behind. Her name was Lillian, and she wasn't just beautiful, she carried an elegance in every gesture, a calm in every word. My father often bragged about her to friends. "She's perfect for me," he'd say, eyes gleaming. I hated the way he said it, as though he had won something precious that should have belonged elsewhere. To me, she was untouchable, someone elevated in a world I didn't belong to. She treated me kindly. Yes, she noticed when I was quiet, asked me about school, encouraged me to study harder, but there was a gentle depth to her eyes, a softness that seemed to look past my exterior into something raw, something hidden. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining it. I was her stepson, after all. Years passed. I grew taller, broader, my voice deepening, my presence changing in ways I hadn't noticed. Lillian, now in her early 30s, seemed to notice too. The way she would pause when I entered a room, the subtle tilt of her head when she spoke to me, the light that seemed to soften in her eyes, it wasn't the same as before. I started to feel it, though I didn't name it. A tension I couldn't place, a longing I didn't know how to reconcile. Began the summer after my 18th birthday. My father had gone on one of his long business trips, leaving the house quiet and still. Lillian and I spent the evenings in the kitchen, cooking together, talking about trivial things, laughing at small jokes. One night, while I reached across the counter to hand her a plate, our hands brushed. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. Her eyes met mine, wide and unguarded, and in that instant, I felt everything I'd tried to deny. "You've grown," she said softly, her voice trembling just slightly. I swallowed, heart racing. I guess time does that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face, the curve of her lips, the warmth in her eyes. I told myself it was admiration, gratitude, nothing more, but the truth refused to stay buried. It wasn't long before the first kiss came. It was late one night. I had gone to check on something in the living room, and she was there, reading. She looked up, smiled faintly, and when I sat down beside her, she leaned forward, lips brushing mine. The shock made my chest ache, my mind scream. Yet I didn't pull away. From that night on, the forbidden unfolded in the quiet hours of our home. We would steal moments, brief touches in the hallway, lingering hands over the counter, the brush of her cheek against mine as she pretended to straighten my collar. We existed in shadows, hiding behind the normalcy of daily life, pretending to be just stepson and stepmother while a storm raged silently between us. Guilt was always there. My father, oblivious or willfully blind, went about his days, but I could not ignore the fact that we were betraying him, violating a boundary that the world deemed sacred. Lillian often whispered to me in the dark, "We can't. People would never forgive this," yet her lips found mine, and her hands lingered where they shouldn't. I remember the first time we were nearly discovered. My father returned early from a business trip. We had been in the living room together, close, sharing a bottle of wine. He opened the door, paused, and in that split second, I felt the cold rush of panic. Lillian pulled back, smooth and composed, greeting him with the perfect stepmother smile. My heart pounded for hours afterward. We lay awake that night, silently holding hands beneath the covers, hearts still racing, knowing it had almost ended. Before it truly began, we tried to set boundaries, to suppress what we felt. But desire is persistent. Months turned into years, and our secret became a lifeline. The world outside could never understand, and perhaps it shouldn't. What we had was more than physical. It was a communion of loneliness, of longing, of being seen in a way neither of us had ever been seen before. One summer, when I was 22, everything changed. My father's business collapsed, leaving him bitter and restless. Arguments filled the house. Lillian grew withdrawn, and I became her confidant in ways that went beyond words. One evening, after a particularly tense confrontation, she cried. In my arms, trembling, "I can't live like this," she whispered. "I can't be his, not anymore. And I don't want to be without you." I held her, heart aching with the weight of our forbidden love, and whispered back, "Then you won't be." "Not if I can help it." We left soon after. The town we had lived in would never understand. Whispers and gossip would follow us forever. But we didn't care. In a new city, in a small apartment tucked away from prying eyes, we built a life together. It wasn't easy. We had no family, no friends who could condone what we had done, but we had each other, and that was enough. Years passed. Lillian opened a small art gallery, pouring herself into painting and curation. I worked odd jobs, supporting us, giving her the life she deserved without worrying about appearances. Our love deepened, no longer frantic or furtive, but steady and unwavering. Yet, even in quiet happiness, the echoes of our past never fully faded. I would sometimes see her gaze into the distance, lost in memory, and I knew she carried both guilt and longing, even as she tried to bury it. The end came quietly, years later. Lillian fell ill, a sudden disease that no doctor could fully treat. I stayed by her side, caring for her as she had once cared for me in ways I never could repay. Her last words were soft, a whisper against my chest. "You touched my soul." And I hope I touched yours. I held her until the end, the weight of years of love, of secret sins, all wrapped into one quiet farewell. And as I sat alone afterward, surrounded by the life we had built, I understood. She had never just been my father's wife, and I had never just been a stepson to her. We had found each other in the cracks of a world that didn't understand. And in that love imperfect, illicit, impossible, we had touched the deepest parts of each other's souls. Now, add more to this story and make this story long without titles. Years continued to unfold with a rhythm both gentle and relentless. I kept the apartment as Lillian had left it. Small touches of her presence everywhere, her favorite teacups lying neatly on the shelves, the faint scent of lavender still lingering in the living room, the stacks of canvases in the corner that she had never quite finished. Every morning I would wake and feel her absence like a tangible weight, and yet paradoxically, her presence was everywhere. It was in the quiet corners and the light that pooled across the hardwood floors, in the garden she had loved so fiercely, where wildflowers had sprung up in the spaces she had once tended. Time brought its own lessons. I learned to live alone without feeling empty, a strange balance of mourning and reverence guiding me. I would take long walks in the early hours, visiting the places we had frequented together, the small park where she had once laughed at my terrible attempts to swing higher than the children half her age, the little coffee shop where we had shared endless conversations about art, literature, and life's small injustices. In those moments, the memory of her felt as vivid as the world around me, and I realized that love, once deeply embedded in the soul, never truly leaves. It simply becomes part of the landscape of your life. Occasionally, I would meet neighbors, acquaintances, or the rare traveler passing through town. They would see a solitary man tending a garden, caring for a home, living quietly. None of them could know what had happened in that apartment, the depth of the love that had bloomed in secrecy, or the lives we had intertwined so completely. It was strange, this duality, the ordinary on the outside and the extraordinary within. Years later, I received a letter from Claire again, Lillian's daughter. She had children of her own now, and she wanted to know more about her mother's later years. I invited her to the apartment, and we spoke at length about Lillian, about the life we had shared, about her artistry, her passions, her small eccentricities that had made her so alive. Claire's eyes, so like Lillian's, glistened with a mixture of curiosity and understanding. She did not judge. She only wanted to know the truth. And in sharing it, I felt the last weight of secrecy lift. Her laughter mingled with memories, her questions coaxed forgotten stories to life, and for a brief time, I felt as if Lillian had returned through the threads of her family. The seasons moved on. Winter came with its harsh winds and long nights, and I would sit by the fireplace, hands cupped around a mug of tea, staring into the flames as if they could conjure her image. Spring brought renewal, the garden blooming once more with roses and lilies, daisies and lavender, a riot of colors that reminded me of her careful touch and the energy she had poured into life. I planted new flowers each year as if speaking to her through the soil, telling her without words that she was remembered, loved, and irreplaceable. Time changed me as well. My hair grayed, my hands bore the marks of work and age, and my face carried the lines of a life lived in both love and sorrow. Yet the memories of Lillian, the lessons she had imparted without knowing, and the depth of connection we had shared, remained as vivid as ever. Sometimes I would catch my reflection and see traces of the man she had helped shape, the man capable of deep devotion, patience, and understanding. She had touched my soul in ways that no one else could, and that influence was everlasting. One late afternoon, years after her passing, I took a long walk through the park where we had first dared to admit our feelings. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the path, and I felt a quiet joy that came not from moving forward or leaving the past behind, but from carrying it with me. I could see her laughter in the glimmer of light on a bird's wing, feel her warmth in the gentle breeze brushing my face, hear her voice in the rustle of leaves. Life without her was quieter, but it was also rich with memory and love, threaded into the very fabric of my being. Sometimes, when the wind whispered just right, I could swear I heard her calling my name, soft and playful, the way she used to when she wanted me to follow her somewhere unexpected. I would close my eyes, smile, and follow the sound in my mind, allowing the memory of her to guide me. Even in absence, she was my constant companion, my inspiration, and the measure by which I judged all things. In the solitude of my later years, I realized that the story of Lillian and me was not one of scandal or judgment. It was one of profound connection, of love that transcended societal boundaries, and of the way two souls can recognize each other against all odds. We had walked through darkness and emerged, not unscathed, but wholly transformed. Our love had been a defiance, a rebellion, a salvation, and it had endured beyond the constraints of time and circumstance. As night fell on the quiet apartment, I would sit in Lillian's favorite chair, hands folded, heart full, and whisper into the stillness, "You touched my soul, and you always will." And in that simple acknowledgement, I found peace, proof that love, when true, never dies. It lives on in memory and legacy, and in the quiet, enduring echo of two hearts that refuse to be anything less than completely, irrevocably entwined. The years stretched on, quietly folding themselves into one another. I continued to live in the apartment Lillian had left me, but over time it ceased to feel like a space of absence and instead became a sanctuary of memory. I started keeping journals, small notebooks in which I recorded the minutiae of daily life, the flashes of memory that reminded me of her, and the emotions that rose unbidden. Some nights I would sit at the small oak desk by the window, pen in hand, and write letters to her that I would never send, detailing how the world had moved on without her, how I had learned to endure her absence, and how, despite it all, my love for her had not diminished. Friends came and went, some curious about my solitary life, some drawn by my quiet presence, but none could truly understand the depth of the bond I had shared. I became a careful observer of human behavior, more attentive to subtle gestures, lingering glances, the way people reached for each other unconsciously. I saw her in everyone, the softness in a smile, the tenderness in a touch, the courage in standing alone when the world disagreed. Lillian had taught me more than love. She had taught me perception, empathy, and the beauty of connection. Occasionally, Claire returned, sometimes with her children, sometimes alone. The children were curious and shy at first, asking questions about the flowers, about the furniture, about the pictures on the walls. I told them stories, innocent ones, careful not to betray the nuances of a relationship they were too young to comprehend, but I spoke often of Lillian, ensuring that they would know her as the woman who had loved fiercely and lived boldly. I watched them grow, and in doing so, I felt as if a part of Lillian's spirit remained alive, moving through the next generation. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Winters were cold and introspective, evenings spent by the fireplace with a book or music filling the apartment. Spring brought renewal, not just to the garden, but to my own spirit. I planted new flowers each year, cultivating colors and scents that Lillian had loved. Summer meant long walks in the park, the sunlight catching the golden strands in my hair, the warm air carrying memories like fragrant pollen. Autumn painted the world in burnt orange and crimson, and I often walked through fallen leaves, feeling her presence as a whisper in the wind. One particular autumn evening, I came across a small bench by the edge of the park, one we had never visited together. It overlooked a small pond, the surface of which mirrored the orange canopy above. I sat there, remembering how we had once talked about life, how she had confided her dreams and regrets in me, how I had whispered back my own. I closed my eyes, letting the wind carry the faintest of her laughter to me, and for the first time in years, I felt a peace that was not only about memory, but about acceptance. Even as my body aged, the imprint of our love never faded. My hands, once strong and calloused from work, now bore the gentle tremor of time, yet they still knew the contours of the garden soil. The feel of petals, the weight of books, the smooth edges of a teacup she had cherished. I learned to move slowly, deliberately, savoring the rhythm of days, knowing that the passage of time was both merciless and gentle. I spoke to her often, sometimes aloud, sometimes in whispers carried by the wind. I miss you, I would say. I love you still. And the world, in its quiet way, listened. The city we had once fled seemed like a distant memory, almost unreal, a place where our love had been hidden and scrutinized. Here, in the small town that neither of us had planned for, we had carved out a life of authenticity, even in her absence. The apartment became a museum of her presence. The piano she had once played, the canvases half finished, the shelves lined with books she had adored. Every corner was a testament to her influence, a reminder that love leaves behind more than just absence. It leaves legacy. Over time, I began to notice the subtler ways in which love persists. The way a neighbor would pause to admire the garden, echoing her eye for detail. The way a stranger's kindness could awaken memories of her warmth. Even the patterns of light through the window brought reminders of her careful attention to the home, the way she had moved through it, as if leaving whispers of herself behind. I realized that living with absence was not about forgetting. It was about integrating love into the fabric of life so completely that it became inseparable from it. Late at night, when the world was hushed, I would sit by the window and let my mind wander through all the years we had shared, the stolen glances, the quiet confessions, the brushes of hands that had carried entire lifetimes of longing. I felt her in the rustle of leaves and the faint scent of lavender drifting from a neighboring garden, in the stars that seemed to shine with the intensity of memories unspoken. Every breath was a dialogue with her, every heartbeat an echo of what we had once shared. And so the years passed quietly, profoundly. The world around me shifted, neighbors moved, children grew, seasons came and went, and I remained steadfast in the memory of a love that transcended conventional boundaries. I understood now that Lillian's touch, her influence, and her presence had shaped me into the person I had become. She had touched my soul in ways that could never be measured, never be fully articulated, and yet that touch remained, persistent and enduring, like the scent of roses after a storm. When the end finally approached, I felt no fear. I would sit in the garden one last time, breathing in the flowers she had loved, the colors she had chosen, the life she had nurtured, and I would whisper, "Thank you for everything." My heart, though weary, would hold her memory like a flame that could never be extinguished. And I knew as I closed my eyes for the last time that she would be waiting not as my father's wife, not as the woman who had been placed in my life by circumstance, but as the one who had touched my soul so completely that even eternity could not sever the bond we had forged. I understood the boundaries of our relationship from the start. But passion has a way of erasing the lines you think are unbreakable. It began in small ways, longer touches when handing her a cup of tea, lingering glances across the room, hands brushing by accident only to stay pressed together. Those fleeting moments grew heavier with desire until one night, after a storm had rattled the windows and drenched the world outside, we found ourselves alone in the apartment. Her laughter had always been a melody to me, but that night it trembled, soft and unguarded, and drew me in like gravity. I could feel the heat of her gaze before I even looked, and when I did, the intensity left me breathless. She reached for me, almost instinctively, and our lips met in a kiss that carried the weight of years of unspoken longing. It was soft at first, exploratory, but soon became urgent and demanding, as if every hour we had denied ourselves was clawing its way to the surface. Her hands roamed with a familiarity that made my heart race, a tenderness wrapped in desperation. My own fingers tangled in her hair, tracing the line of her jaw, memorizing the way her body pressed into mine. Clothes became a barrier too heavy to maintain, discarded in a flurry of whispered names and gasps. Each kiss, each touch was a confession that our hearts had known what our minds tried to deny. We moved to the bed, the candlelight flickering over her skin, painting her in golds and shadows. I marveled at the way she seemed to exist entirely for me. Every movement a declaration of her desire, her trust, her surrender. I traced the curves of her body as if committing them to memory, and she responded in kind, hands and lips exploring with a precision born of years of closeness. There was no shame in that moment, only the raw, unfiltered truth that we had longed for each other. Beyond reason, our nights became a rhythm of passion and quiet intimacy. Mornings were spent tangled in sheets, the sunlight spilling across her face, and I would brush her hair from her eyes, heart swelling at the sight of her smile. We whispered secrets in the half-light, planning lives we couldn't entirely claim, promising each other loyalty in a world that would never understand. Every embrace, every sigh, every shared heartbeat reinforced the undeniable fact we belonged to each other in body, heart, and soul. Even in the daytime, the tension lingered, a hand resting just a moment too long on my shoulder, the way she would lean close to whisper something in my ear, her breath hot against my skin. Our love had become a language of its own, unspoken yet understood, where every glance, every brush of skin spoke volumes. There were moments when the world seemed to fade, leaving only us, two souls bound by passion, memory, and a love that had begun in the shadows and now demanded the light. And yet, amid the heat and longing, there were pauses of tenderness, moments when she would look at me with a softness that broke through every worry, every guilt. She would trace the line of my face with her fingers, voice trembling as she murmured, "I never thought I could feel this alive again." I would hold her close, heart thundering, and whisper that I felt the same, that she had awakened a part of me that had been dormant since childhood, a part that knew what it meant to love completely and without restraint. Our love was not without consequence. We both knew the risks, the judgments, the betrayal that hung over every encounter, yet that awareness only made each touch more urgent, each kiss more passionate, each night a claim of devotion and defiance of the world. She had once been my father's wife, a figure placed in my life by circumstance, yet she had become the only woman whose touch could calm my fears, ignite my desires, and fill the void I had carried for so long in the quiet aftermath of passion. When our bodies still hummed with heat, we would lie together, arms entwined, whispering reassurances, naming a love that had grown between us. "You are my soul," she would say, and I would answer, "And you are mine." Each word cemented the reality of our union, that what had started in forbidden curiosity had blossomed into a fierce, consuming love that neither time nor judgment could diminish. The years stretched on, and with them came new rhythms of passion and devotion. We learned each other's bodies, minds, and hearts with meticulous attention, exploring every nuance of desire, every hidden corner of affection. Even in our older years, when the world demanded restraint, our love remained a fire that could not be extinguished, a secret sanctuary of lust and tenderness, of longing fulfilled and hearts entwined. We grew bolder, moving beyond stolen moments into a life built for each other, a life where our passion and our care intertwined, where desire and devotion were inseparable. Every touch was a reaffirmation, every kiss a declaration. In her arms I was home, with her I was whole. Our love had begun in the shadows, born of necessity and longing, but it flourished into a fierce, passionate, undeniable force and eternal bond that defined both of us, body and soul.